Hi, I'm Jeanette Roche. This is Bridge City News. Here's a look at some of the stories we have lined up for you tonight. The UN humanitarian aid coordinator warns of peace slipping away in the Middle East. Plus, voters decide it's time for a change in Newfoundland and Labrador. And parents hoping to access government funds during the Alberta teachers' strike are warned, beware of scammers.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Jeanette Roche.
Thanks for joining us. The United Nations humanitarian chief says that hopes pinned on last week's ceasefire deal between Hamas and Israel are slipping. Tom Fletcher gave the warning as aid groups again struggle to deliver needed supplies into the Gaza Strip to ease hunger, disease, and collapsing sanitation. The Egyptian Red Crescent says 400 trucks carrying food, fuel, and medical supplies are bound for the Palestinian territory today. Canadian officials said last week they would support the peace process with humanitarian aid. Fletcher called on Hamas to make efforts to return the bodies of deceased hostages and Israel to allow for the surge in aid. Today at the White House, there was some tough talk from U.S. President Donald Trump. He was asked about Hamas disarming.
How long will it take Hamas to disarm, and can you guarantee that is going to happen?
Well, they're going to disarm, and because they said they were going to disarm. And if they don't disarm, we will disarm them.
How will you do that?
I don't have to explain that to you. But if they don't disarm, we will disarm them. They know I'm not playing games. Okay? Now, we did something monumental. We got the hostages back. That was the first thing we had to do. Above all else, get the hostages back. Now, they misrepresented because we were told they had 26, 24 of dead hostages, if we can use those terms. And it seems as though they don't have that because we're talking about a much lesser number. But that's a very tough subject. I want them back. That's what they said. I want them back. Also, they said they were going to disarm. We have told them we want to disarm, and they will disarm. And if they don't disarm, we will disarm them. And it'll happen quickly and perhaps violently. But they will disarm. Do you understand me?
Yes, you say
because
quickly.
you always, everyone says, oh, well, they won't disarm. They will disarm.
Gaza residents say Hamas fighters were increasingly visible on Tuesday, deploying along routes needed for aid deliveries. The Reuters news agency also has confirmed that 7 men were executed in public by Hamas for allegedly collaborating with Israeli forces. Back here in Canada, Tony Wakeham says it's the honor of his life to be elected Premier of Newfoundland and Labrador. His progressive Conservatives won last night's election, securing 21 of the legislature's 40 ridings. The slim majority comes after 10 years of Liberal Party rule. Wakeham has already stirred up some controversy, suggesting a tentative hydroelectric deal with Quebec might be put to a referendum. We get more from Sarah Smelly with the Canadian Press.
The Liberals unveiled the deal in December, saying it would bring about $225 billion to the province over the next 50 years. Tony Wakeham vowed tonight to order an independent third-party review of the draft deal to be sure it is the best possible deal for Newfoundland and Labrador. Negotiations are underway for final agreements with hopes of finishing next year. It's unclear what will happen now if Wakeham does order a review. Wakeham got a standing ovation tonight in Western Newfoundland as he vowed to build a bigger, brighter future for Newfoundland and Labrador.
The Federal Conservative Party is laying out a plan to improve job prospects facing Canada's young workers. The plan would see government student assistance programs offer more support to students seeking work in high-demand fields. It would also allow businesses in regions facing labor shortages to write off the cost of building homes for workers. Unemployment rose to nearly 15% for youth aged 15 to 24 last month. The September figure hit a 15-year high outside the pandemic years. Talks aimed at finding a solution to the Alberta teachers' strike have stalled. The Alberta Teachers Association says it presented a new proposal to the province on Tuesday, a proposal Finance Minister Nate Horner says would require almost $2 billion more in spending than the government has set aside for a deal, to which ATA President Jason Schilling responds.
$2 billion is $500 million over the course of 4 years of the agreement. So that is something that is responsible. It is something that is achievable by government. We are the least funded school jurisdiction in all of Canada. In order to increase us to be to the average in budget 2025, you would have to have seen more than about 13%, and public education was funded at about 4.5%. So there's room in there for government to move. They know this, and we expect them to come back to the table to have further discussions at that space and not necessarily in the media.
The union says the Tuesday offer included a phase-in approach to achieving manageable student-teacher ratios, a counter to the government's 3% annual salary increase offer, and new language designed to finally begin addressing the increasing complexity in today's classrooms. Horner says the door is open for further discussion, but no more meetings have been scheduled for now. The roughly week-long strike by some 51,000 teachers is affecting some 740,000 students across the province. Yesterday, late in the afternoon, the government of Alberta announced parents could now apply through the Parent Payment Program portal, which provides support during the teacher strike. Shortly after, parents were warned to watch out for spoof websites imitating the provincial government's portal. Our BCN's Heidi Echeverria has the details.
Added to the stress of not being able to send their children to school, now Alberta parents are dealing with attempted fraud.
Unfortunately, fraudsters or scammers are opportunists. So they're always looking for a chance to steal personal information and your money. This is an opportunity for them to do that.
Alberta ranks third in Canada for fraud incidents per capita, with 169 cases per 100,000 people, according to the 2022 Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre report. This makes it especially important for parents to be vigilant when applying for programs like this.
Better Business Bureau also wants to get the message out, to let people know, to let parents know that they need to be cautious.
In the same vein of staying cautious, it's important for parents to know that the government of Alberta does not send out links. People should go directly to its official website at alberta.ca.
Scammers, again, are opportunists. They're very good at what they do. These are professionals. These are professional fraudsters.
Forewarned is forearmed. The more Alberta parents know about this scam, the better they can protect themselves.
So they don't hit a link that's being sent by an email or a text. When you hit a link like that, it'll send you to a spoof page, which is fake. Use some good digital skills there. So make sure you're on the legitimate website. Look for anything that looks funny. It might have weird grammar, might have wonky grammar, or kind of look funny. That's a sign. It's a red sign. Unsolicited link, very important. Don't click on those links.
According to the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre, Canadians lost $600 million to fraud in 2024. If you think you've experienced a scam, report it to the police using the non-emergency line. For Bridge City News, I'm Heidi Echevarria.
Thank you so much, Heidi. The Alberta government is expecting a final report today from an investigation into allegations of corruption over health contracts. Former Manitoba Judge Raymond Wyant was to determine whether any staff at the Health Ministry, Alberta Health Services, or companies involved in the contracts properly disclosed and addressed any potential conflicts of interest. The allegations, none of which have been tested in court, stemmed from a wrongful dismissal lawsuit filed earlier this year by the former head of AHS, Anthana Mentzelopoulos. The RCMP and Alberta's Auditor General also launched investigations but have not yet released their findings. Premier Danielle Smith's government has denied any wrongdoing. In a statement released on Wednesday, the group Friends of Medicare says no matter what's in the report, a full public inquiry needs to be held into alleged corruption in Alberta's surgical procurement and contracting processes. It was a full house at Yates Theatre Tuesday night, but the production was no musical. Taking center stage were all 22 candidates running for Lethbridge Mayor and City Council. The Lethbridge Chamber of Commerce hosted the election forum, where the 18 council contenders took turns introducing themselves and expressing their platform in under 3 minutes. But it was only the 4 mayoral candidates who had the opportunity to answer questions from the audience and a panel of 4 chamber chairpersons. Questions Questions from the room included concerns about business taxes, business retention, incentive programs, bringing more physicians to Lethbridge, student retention, improving transit, a regional tourism strategy, housing, and a third bridge. On Wednesday afternoon, a meet and greet with mayoral and council candidates also took place at the Lethbridge Senior Citizens Organization. If you missed the chance to take in a forum or hear from candidates about the issues you are most concerned with, there is still an opportunity Wednesday night from 7 till 9 p.m. at Allied Arts Council. It's a mix and mingle. Candidates will be assigned to tables, and attendees can visit them as they wish. No prepared remarks are required. Advanced voting is on again this week in Lethbridge. Voters can cast ballots Wednesday to Saturday from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. at the Lethbridge Trade and Convention Center, formerly the Agri-Food Hub and Trade Center, and the Corvan Ray YMCA at the Cavendish Farms Center. And as advanced voting continues this week, we continue to highlight candidates that are running for school trustee in the Lethbridge region. A local resident has decided to run in the Lethbridge Public School Division over recent provincial government policies. Michelle Brown tells BCN she has concerns over trans and LGBTQ plus rights in schools, including within school sports, and would also call for a ban on generative artificial intelligence in classrooms.
The decision that made me run for trusteeship was my concerns about ministerial orders 27 and 29, as well as the book bans. Now, I'm an author, as well as being a parent and as well as being an intersex person myself. And so I really want parents to consider whether their children, whether they're straight or cis or whether they are queer, might be endangered by a ministerial order that not only legalizes but encourages investigating the genders of children just so they can play sports. I would like to see greater funding for staff. I would like to see significant expansions for disabled and other marginalized students. And I would also like to try and see improvements like community gardens and solar panels on schools. I think we need to ban generative AI locally for the region and its use in both curriculum, school assignments, and on school computers, keeping kids a lot safer from things that are being pushed by big tech companies without regard for children's health and safety.
As a reminder, voting day for municipal elections is next Monday, the 20th. You might not know this, but the current Alberta license plate for cars was designed back in 1984, and the province has decided after 4 decades it's time for a refresh. So from October 15th through November the 5th, Albertans can take part in a tournament-style online vote for a new provincial license plate design. The new license plate will be available in late 2026 and be based on a strong and free theme. In the first phase of voting, Albertans can vote for their favorite of 8 unique concepts that incorporate symbols of Alberta's beauty, history, and spirit. Following the first phase, 4 designs will advance to the next round of voting where the top 2 will be selected, and subsequently there will be a final vote for the winning plate concept. You can check out the plates at alberta.ca/pick-a-plate. The winning new license plate will be announced during the fall session of the legislature. A notable evangelist from the U.S. says Canada is hungrier than ever for revival. Zach Teasdale of Elijah's Chariot Incorporated has traveled across the world preaching the gospel, turning people toward Jesus and witnessing miracles. Teasdale, who is at the tail end of a week-long stop here in Lethbridge, tells BCN that he has felt a strong calling to Alberta, where he says he has seen an incredible response.
Well, I was laying down one day, and I had a dream, and in the dream, I saw First Nation people crying out, saying, "Come to Canada." And I heard God say, "Go to Canada." I said, "Lord, I don't even know any First Nation people. And when do you want me to go? I have a baby on the way." And I remembered I had a contact. I reached out to him, who's First Nation pastor of a First Nation church. And I said, "Lord, what am I supposed to say to him?" He said, "Ask him to borrow his boat. And if you'll take out the boat out on the water, then there'll be a harvest of fish." Well, we've been here. We've already reached over 1,000 people in these 6 days. I feel like Canada is at the most hungriest point that I've seen in the past 2 decades. I feel like Canada is actually more hungry than America. I've been to Quebec, I've been to Alberta, I've been to several different places, and I see the same hunger. Matter of fact, in the more, maybe you could say, hostile environments towards Christians, where there's more lockdowns, there's more issues, there's more speech laws and stuff like that, preventing the work, I'm seeing even a bigger hunger there.
Teasdale and Elijah's Chariot continue their revival week at the Lethbridge Holiday Inn from tonight through Friday, with events beginning at 7 p.m. each night. And finally, dentists in the UK have completed treatment on a very special patient. A lioness named Lyra, who was rescued from the illegal pet trade and war in Ukraine, has undergone a tooth extraction.
Lyra arrived earlier this year from the war in Ukraine. She was part of the illegal pet and wildlife trade, so we didn't know too much about her, but we noticed very early on after her arrival here that she had a little bit of discomfort in her jaw and her mouth. Elliot, our vet, put her on the anaesthetic, moved her from the Lion Rescue Centre where she's housed into our veterinary centre, and then that's where Peter and Elliot monitored her, did a full health check, but also managed to remove the tooth, which was around 8 centimetres in length, so it was a pretty big tooth, and get rid of the abscess. So now our team are just monitoring her this week. She's on pain relief, she's on soft foods for the time being, and on antibiotics, and after hopefully next week she'll be good as gold.
Oh, poor Lyra. That must have hurt so much. Lyra arrived at the Big Cat Sanctuary from war-torn Ukraine after a campaign raised £500,000 British for her and 4 other rescued lions. So sweet. Ontario Premier Doug Ford is calling on Stellantis to live up to a promise it made to restart operations at its plant in Brampton, where 3,000 employees work. The automaker announced it was pausing work in Brampton last February amid a retooling of the plant for both electric and gas Jeep Compass vehicles. With more is a report from Michelle Zadikian with the Canadian Press.
Politicians and auto industry leaders are slamming Stellantis after the automaker announced it will be shifting Jeep production that was slated for a Brampton, Ontario facility to a plant in the U.S. Ontario Premier Doug Ford said he's spoken with the company to emphasize how disappointed he is in the move. Stellantis announced the shift as part of a broader $13 billion plan to grow its American production by 50% over the next 4 years. Prime Minister Mark Carney said the move was directly tied to tariffs and said he'll be working with the company to find new opportunities in and around Brampton. Stellantis said it continues to invest in Canada, including adding a 3rd shift to its assembly plant in Windsor, Ontario, and that it's in talks with the government on the future of the Brampton facility. Union head Lana Payne said Canadian auto jobs are being sacrificed at the Trump altar and said saving the Brampton plant is a top priority to send a strong message to other corporations who are also thinking of shifting investments south of the border. In announcing its major U.S. investment, Stellantis said reopening its plant in Illinois to expand U.S. Jeep production would create around 3,300 new jobs.
Manufacturing sales were down in Canada for the month of August. Stats Canada says production declines in the aerospace and auto industries were behind the 1% decline, with total manufacturing sales for the month at $69.4 billion. The agency says manufacturing sales were down in 12 of 21 subsectors, while the transportation equipment subsector dropped 5.7%. Meantime, Stats Can reported separately that wholesale sales fell 1.2% in August, excluding petroleum products, other hydrocarbons, and oil, seed, and grain. Now here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was up 283 points to 30,637. The Dow was down 17 to 46,253. The S&P 500 was up 26 to 6,671, and the Nasdaq was up 148 to 22,670. West Texas Intermediate oil was up 19 cents to 58.78 US per barrel. Natural gas was up a cent to 3.03 US. Gold was up 64.36 to 42.07.61 US an ounce, and silver was up $1.59 to 53 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $7 per bushel. Barley is at $5.44. Canola is at $14.10, and corn is at $7.16. Live cattle were up 35 cents to $242.17. Feeder cattle were down 45 cents to $379.72. Lean hogs like December contract was up 45 cents to $83.60, and the Canadian dollar was even over the past 24 hours and currently sits at $71.20 US.
Recapping one of our top stories, U.S. President Donald Trump says if Hamas does not disarm, the United States will disarm them, and violently if need be. Trump made the comments Tuesday at the White House. His comments came as footage circulated online showing a public execution and other displays of force by Hamas fighters in Gaza since the U.S. brokered ceasefire began last week. Trump did not say when he expects Hamas to surrender its weapons. As teachers continue to strike across Alberta, parents can apply for provincial funding to cover costs of keeping their kids home from school. Alberta correspondent for the National Post, Tyler Dawson, will join me to chat about this and other provincial issues coming up next. Also, when you see news happening in your community, be sure to send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. You can also visit our website or YouTube channel anytime to check out more of our stories and interviews.